Up, everybody? Stevie B here from Dynasty Life Fantasy Football. Special guest in the house, Mr. Matt Waldman. Plenty of stuff that this guy does. Why don't you give us a rundown, a little bit about what you do and about that rookie scouting profile, which I just actually recently downloaded. 1,000 pages, insane amount of content there. But yeah, why don't you tell us a little bit?
Sure. I've been a fantasy writer since 2003. I'm a senior staff writer at footballguys.com, where I pen a weekly article called The Gut Check. I've written probably over 650 of them at this point. And also The Top 10, which is a film-based analysis during the season, along with a variety of other articles that I come out with on a regular basis, preseason and postseason. And then, of course, I've been doing the rookie scouting portfolio, which is an 18-year-old publication that I put out every year. It has a pre-draft and post-draft publication. It is one of the two most purchased draft guides by NFL personnel people like scouts, according to folks like Alex Brown, who was the director of recruiting at SMU, who's also worked at Rice as their director of recruiting, and with Tom Herman at Houston when they were on the come up there. So he meets with scouts and folks on a regular basis. And so, the RSP is a look at the skill positions: quarterback, running back, wide receiver, and tight end. Takes you through my entire process of how I evaluate guys, in terms of how I score it, how I define what I look at, as well as giving you real football analysis with some fantasy implications based on, my knowledge and experience in industry. And then a post draft that comes out. It came out a couple weeks ago, a week after the NFL draft, which is nearly 120 pages worth of information. And you get a cheat sheet that takes my re-ranking of players based on the fits that I see after the draft versus ADP that I followed of, about a dozen leagues, and give you kind of a tiered ranking set across all the positions of about 220 players, and gives you a sweet spot of where you should take them. So if I like Justin Jefferson back in the day and I thought he was the best fit, but everyone was saying, oh, that's not such a great fit, just like they did with him and AJ Brown. And I'm like, well, you might not have to pick him as early. So here's where you can get him without getting sniped, So I do things like that. And you can get all of that for $21.95 at mattwaldman.com. And a percentage of the sales up to $5,000 goes to an organization called Darkness to Light, which is devoted to preventing sexual abuse of children through training programs, individual group training, educational institutions, government, whatever, as well as helping people understand how to handle the situation when it unfortunately occurs so that you don't create more trauma for the victim.
Gotcha. Nice. Very nice. Now, I'm guessing you play Dynasty Fantasy Football as well.
A little bit of that,
A
yeah,
little
here
bit.
and there.
Okay.
Yeah, just a little bit. Most of my leagues are dynasty leagues, so yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah. I mean, it's the only way to play nowadays. It's way more fun, being the GM.
It's basically how I got into playing. I started, to be honest. I mean, yeah, I started in redraft, but I'd say most of my leagues have been dynasty leagues since probably around 2001.
Wow.
So
Okay.
I've been playing dynasty and mostly IDP dynasty with 40, 50 man rosters since about that time.
Okay. Yeah, I've been a few actually with some IDP as well. But all right, let's get into some of the quarterbacks here. I just watched your Anthony Richardson video from months back, about some of the processing and being able to manipulate some of those defenders in the secondary, and him going to the Colts. How do you feel about that fit and his overall projection, I guess, now in the NFL?
Well, I think it's a great fit on the surface because you have an offensive line that should be better than what it was last year. They still have some solid components there. They have a terrific run game with Jonathan Taylor heading that up. So you're going to take some pressure off of Anthony Richardson because now you're gonna be able to set up a lot of play action with a good ground game. And I know a lot of people who are in the analytics side of the spectrum like to say, well, it doesn't matter whether ground game's good or not. Play action is good regardless. But there is a little bit of a difference. And you've got an Adrian Peterson jersey behind you.
Oh
So I
yeah.
know you understand that there's a little bit of a difference in how players react and how boxes get stacked when you have a player who can move a pile. And certainly if there's a player who can move a pile somewhat reminiscent of Adrian Peterson in this era, it's Jonathan Taylor. So you've got that. You've got a coach in Shane Steichen who has worked with Jalen Hurts and in LA with guys like Goff. So he's been versatile in terms of how he matches his schemes to the talent of the players around them. And, like Jalen Hurts, Anthony Richardson's athletic ability will be on display with designed rollouts, with ability to run, so, and also being able to attack downfield. But unlike Jalen Hurts, who had more experience than Anthony Richardson actually showed more savvy, like you alluded to with the video I talked about, moving defenders around, manipulating them, being able to move in the pocket with control, because there's lots of guys who can break a pocket. Kyler Murray breaks a pocket. He also wastes a lot of time because he doesn't move efficiently breaking a pocket. And he's still a good quarterback, but Anthony Richardson knows how to use his athletic ability, but also knows how to channel it into an efficient movement to find easy solutions to what look like difficult problems. And a lot of guys make things look harder than it should be. And that shows up well on SportsCenter, but it really doesn't help you, with the number of plays where you should find easy solutions and make the game winnable. And Richardson is going to be in situations with, a good group of young receivers that can grow with him. And they can spread the field a little bit more if they want to, or they can play 2 tight ends, sometimes 3 tight ends. So you get some schematic diversity, and along with his movement skills and what he can do, you can really scheme a lot of different things up to his strengths. So I think that there's a lot of room for him to grow in this offense, and maybe, in year one, you're going to see ups and downs. You're going to see him make some huge mistakes that most quarterbacks usually make as rookies, but people will probably say, "Oh, see, I told you, he's raw, he's awful, he's inaccurate, X, Y, and Z," that they're saying right now. And I would just recommend anybody who's in a dynasty league that if you hear people saying that and you can get him at even a cheaper price when he's going through the ups and downs of his rookie year, I would do that, because by the end of it, in 2-3 years, he's going to be a top 5 quarterback in this league.
Yeah, I mean, even in drafts now, he's going like early second round startup drafts. So we play Superflex, so 2 QBs, and he's going at that churn after like Deshaun Watson, pretty much right there now. So yeah, I mean, absolutely, because even if he doesn't do well this year, like you said, some people will be off of him, but his value is just going to increase, with him being there, another year or so. So the value is going to go up. I like Anthony Richardson. I wasn't sure about him at first. I'd rather take Bryce Young early on, but then once the draft happened, he went to the Colts. I started just liking it a little bit more and saying, you know what, I'm willing to take the risk, even in Superflex, where it could set you back if you did draft a Zach Wilson, in the past or something like that. But yeah, I'm willing to take the shot on him. And then with the young core, like you said, with Josh Downs and Michael Pittman. Which one of those receivers do you think is better for him, or do you think is better kind of just in general with him there now? Do you think it's Josh Downs there in the slot? Do you have high hopes on Josh Downs? What do you even feel about Josh Downs to begin with?
Yeah, I mean, I would even add Alec Pierce is worthwhile mentioning in this conversation, because Pierce is a very skilled player with the ball in the air. So with Downs, I mean, certainly, everyone likes the athletic ability that you're seeing from him. Jalen, Reggie Wayne saying, good things about him and really liking him is always something that people are going to feel good about. But I think at the end of the day, when I'm looking at, how Richardson will probably work, and from what I've seen of his game, I think he's going to spread the ball around well enough that I don't think there's going to be one player that's going to be so heavily favored in that offense that you feel like it's going to be a must-have. Certainly, if it works out and they spread the field a little bit more often, then maybe Josh Downs can be a Hunter Renfrow-like player when Renfrow had 100-plus receptions. But as we see with Hunter Renfrow, if you decide you're going to run the ball more, and I don't see why they wouldn't.
Mm-hmm.
You know, how much 11 personnel are they going to use to run the ball when they also have guys like Jelani Woods and Mo Alley Cox who can block? Are they going to go a little bit more often with the 12 personnel or things like that? And if they do that, then maybe Josh Downs is more of a highly rated 800-yard receiver. So for me, I think Pittman's the guy I would obviously be looking towards right now and probably down the line in the future, with Pierce also having a little bit higher upside because of his athletic ability. And you know, so I would probably say I'm willing, you know, obviously I could be wrong about Downs and how they intend to use him, and maybe he gets used a little bit more on the outside. But I think that I would still probably roll with Pittman and Pierce at this point.
Yeah, on the outside. Okay. Ashton Doolin apparently signed a 2-year deal. You got any thoughts on him?
Sure. I mean, he's a highly athletic guy that analytics people really liked, who worked his way from being basically an undrafted free agent into a reliable you know, contributor. And when I think of him as a reliable contributor, that's both probably from a special team standpoint to empty sets as the fourth or fifth receiver. I don't think you're going to be looking at him and saying, oh, now he's going to get a chance to overtake Pittman.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, let's put it this way. Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes, how many receivers do they support that offer top 24 fantasy production? And for Patrick Mahomes, it's been one plus Travis
Yeah.
Kelce. It's never been more than that. So, you know, I think Doolin's got to wait in line. He's a nice football player, but not really a dynasty prospect that I would look at unless you're in, you know, probably more than 50 deep on your
Yeah.
roster.
Yeah, that's got to be the deepest, definitely. Uh, Bryce Young, CJ Stroud. Did you have one? Who did you have over the other? I know you didn't like Will Levis. I know the processing was a big thing with you with Will Levis, but yeah, talk to me about, I guess, Bryce Young and CJ Stroud, their landing spots now, especially Bryce Young there in Carolina, where they did draft Mingo as well. I don't know if you like Mingo or not, but what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I like Mingo, and I think Mingo is probably one of the safer receivers that you can
Hmm.
get that was available in the second tier before the NFL draft. If you were drafting in dynasty leagues before that point, I like all three of Richardson, Stroud, and Young as first tier options that you should be considering in dynasty drafts. I think all of them have a good shot to become solid starters, meaning that they should give you top 12, top 15 production, you know, during their peak years. And, you know, for a quarterback, peak years are probably a good 6 to 9 year period of their careers. So that's a valuable commodity, and they should be anchors in how you build a team. I like Bryce Young a little bit more.
Okay.
I know that people are concerned about the size, but I think that Young is a little bit more of a uninhibited playmaker when it comes to his
Hmm.
decision making. Stroud is a play it safe guy. I know that people look at the University of Georgia game and see that it was somewhat different, but I got to say, I mean, I've watched him against enough teams to look at that and say, well, there were some differences, but it wasn't so much so that I'm saying it was a stark break from what you
Hmm.
saw through the rest of his career. You could find a lot of things there if you really dug deep in other games that were similar. I think the biggest difference between those two is that Young tends to be the guy that he may see the type of throw that the top 5 quarterbacks in the NFL will make, where it requires a level of athletic bravado to be able to, you know, attack downfield in a tighter coverage situation, maybe on the move, you know, where you've got to let that ball go immediately, where Stroud will look at that and go, you know what? I'm going to check this ball down.
Yeah.
This may not be this may be slightly above my pay grade, and I'm not going to try it. You know, look, you're obviously a Vikings guy, so you
Mhm.
know Kirk Cousins early in his career didn't have the physical skills of Brett Favre, but there was an attitude with him in certain situations when he was under duress that he thought he did. And
Mhm.
it's like he stayed at the Holiday Inn Express last night and said, I'm Brett Favre, I can make this throw. And he couldn't. And then after about 4 or 5 years into his career, a few years into I think his regime with the Vikings, he kind of figured out that he can't be that guy. And it still sometimes happens because he's just good enough
Just good enough.
physically that sometimes he can make it happen, but sometimes he doesn't. But he's figured out enough times that maybe he should go for the safer play. And I think Stroud is a little bit more of a guy who could be slightly better than Kirk Cousins in terms of like physically. He
Yeah.
just needs the talent around him. And I think that the Houston Texans have interesting talent in terms of their wide receiving core, but I think it's kind of cloudy there. Whereas I look at Carolina and I think it's very firmly established that Adam Thielen is still at a good point in his career that he can be a productive player and a coach on the field for Young.
Yeah.
Whereas Robert Woods, I'm still wondering about a little bit, as much as I loved his game. Not sure if that's the same thing. DJ Chark is good for what you want him to be, which is a deep threat. And then with Mingo, yeah, I'm a big fan of what Mingo will be able to bring. So when you put that together with Bryce Young's understanding of who he is and how to make creative plays outside of structure and know himself well enough not to get too far ahead of his skis, I like him just a little bit more.
Yeah. Now there was a lot of talk about that S2 test that CJ Stroud didn't do well. What do you think about that test in general? Does that mean anything to you at all?
Well, it's interesting because every week I do on my podcast Scout Talk, and every other week I have Russ Landy on, who's a former NFL scout, current head of personnel for the Edmonton Elks, and before that the Montreal Alouettes. We've talked about this, and for me, the S2 is a good step in the right. It's a step in the right direction in the sense that they're moving away from saying what's important to quarterbacking is strictly something like the Wonderlic, which is basically the SAT that says, how well do you remember information? And how well can you practice certain strategies to basically take tests? But it doesn't really talk about how fast you process things and whether you can process things accurately and in a speedy manner. And so while I think that's what they're trying to capture with it, it's still in the early days of its early iterations. So we don't really have enough data to say, is this really a worthwhile test? Are the where are the exceptions with players? Where do they miss? Where do they what biases does the S2 tend to have? What's missing from it? So until we really have enough data, I just look at it as it's another layer of maybe hundreds of layers of information that you're going to look at, that if it matches up with other things you see, then it could be worthwhile. But the other thing that was said, and to the credit of the CEO, he did mention that when they tested CJ Stroud, it came late at night after a trip. The NFL team literally made them give the test, and they didn't want to give it because they've said that one of the things they want these guys to be fresh, get a good night's sleep in the morning, and then take it. And he hadn't eaten yet. He was like, it was basically,
Okay.
imagine, you've been to Chicago's airport, or if you've been to Atlanta, where I am, if you've been in that airport all night or a couple airports all night, and then you have to drive an hour someplace, and now you're hungry and you're tired, might not be the best thing. And apparently they retested him and they gave him second opportunity, and they told him they were going to do that anyway, and he performed better on the section than what was leaked. So
Okay.
so that's kind of one of the things, is that I think people remembered the first leak, but when they explained it, they said he did much better. And we had a couple players where that happened, and we told the teams, but they said no, we want them tested now. And he said, well, they told Stroud, we're going to test you again in more ideal conditions than what you're getting, but the team insisted, so we've got to administer it.
Yeah, that is interesting. That of course we don't know that. They don't put that out there.
Right.
Of course. I wasn't really sure what exactly to think about it. I know he wasn't great under pressure, and I didn't know if that test has anything to do with maybe processing that kind of stuff where,
It's
under pressure.
it's just hard to say because it's not like the test is from what I know of the test, it's not it's not a physical test on the
Yeah.
level of so how does it really translate?
Mhm.
That's the big question, and I don't think we're going to know that for another 5, 7, maybe 10 years.
Yeah. Well, that's what he said. He said, "I'm a football player."
Yeah, exactly.
Uh,
I mean, let's look at it this way. Alex Smith was great at the Wonderlic. Okay. And
mhm.
when I talked to quarterback coaches for years, they would say, well, quarterbacks, coaches love quarterbacks who can process through all the answers and are aware of everything on the whiteboard, and they can whiteboard like a coach. But, as a quarterback, you realize that the right answer to every problem on a whiteboard is a check down, and that doesn't win ball games. So at the end of the day, Alex Smith, who aced the Wonderlic, was captain checkdown for most of his career and processed quite slowly, actually, even in his Pro Bowl years. He was a beat or two late with throws that needed to be right away. Whereas, Dan Marino, Steve McNair, those were two examples of guys who had low Wonderlic scores, but they processed the game fast. Brett Favre didn't know what a nickel was, and you guys know
Yeah,
how that turned out.
I remember.
Yeah, but he also was responsible for basically being the first to realize what an RPO, basically invented the RPO. So, did Alex Smith invent a play that is now taking advantage of everything that's going on in football? Or was it the guy who didn't know what a nickel was, but he processed the game fast? And,
Mhm.
sometimes to a fault. But, at the same time, Alex Smith didn't win a Super Bowl and wasn't an MVP multiple times either.
That is true. That is true. Now they did put some weapons, I guess, around Stroud. I mean, Tank Dell. One of my favorite guys actually is Xavier Hutchinson. So I'm curious
Me
to
too.
see what just. Oh, is it okay? Awesome, awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
tell me about Hutchinson. Why you like him?
Well, I mean, the thing what's tough about I like him, but I'm not sure if I love the situation just yet because Dell is such a flashy player. They drafted him
Mhm.
before, and they drafted the draft capital for Hutchinson is much lower, so he's not going to
Yeah.
get the shot as easily. And then the question is, are they going to use him in the slot or use him as a flanker outside?
Mhm.
Excuse me, has a great catch radius. I love how he controls his pacing to set defenders up with his route. So you don't have to be a burner. You just have to have the right amount of speed to be able to play in the NFL. And people forget that. We often look at faster, better, and even teams do that. But it's
Mhm.
really about how you control your pace, how fast you can stop, how quickly you can get in and out of cuts. And wide receiver coaches, I mean, there used to be a YouTube video I'd see all the time that I'd recommend where they show a 4-4 receiver and a 4-7 receiver, and they have them run the same routes. And the one who can't run routes well was the 4-4 receiver, and he looks slower than the 4-7 receiver because
Mhm.
it's about how you control your athletic ability and play efficiently. And Xavier Hutchinson has all of that to his game. And like I said, like we know, he catches the ball extraordinarily well. So the biggest issue with him is Houston the right first stop for him? Will he? If it is, how long is it going to take him to get an opportunity? Because are they going to
Mhm.
have an open competition, or are they going to be like most teams where the GMs are so invested in who they drafted first and early and signed to a bigger contract that they're going to have the somewhat of a draft capital bias and not really give the other guys who are lower on the board um, a real opportunity to compete.
Mhm.
So if he gets an opportunity, I think he'll be able to force them to think about him. But it may take another team for him to really become a starter or a good contributor, and that may mean a second contract.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think Nico Collins is on his last year of his contract, I believe, as well. So that could possibly, open
Yes.
things up. And then you've got obviously Mechie there also. But Mechie, I thought was a slot guy, and now you got Tank Dell, right? So what are they going to do there? Do you think?
Yeah, because Dell certainly has the size of a slot guy, but his footwork is so lightning quick, and he's so
Mm-hmm.
good coming off the line of scrimmage, and he wins the ball well in the air that you could see a scenario where they use him outside a little bit more often.
Okay.
But we'll see if they do that. Mechie, they might have also seen as a flanker, and maybe used him in that way, and that's why it's so confusing because
Yeah.
we know what Collins is. We kind of know what Robert Woods is, which is both. He can play all three positions if you needed him to, but most
Mm-hmm.
likely flanker or slot.
Yep.
Xavier Hutchinson is more of a flanker or a slot. Dell's
Mm-hmm.
a slot or a split end. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's like that's why it's a mess. That's why also that adds into why CJ Stroud, while I still value him as a guy that you should invest in dynasty leagues, he's third on my board of the quarterbacks right now
Mm-hmm.
because who's he throwing to and where they're going to line up, and we don't know, just
Yeah.
yet, and they're all young.
Yep. Yep. Absolutely. So that's the frustrating part of it. But I've got Hutchinson and a couple taxi squads, just kind of holding him down there.
I hope to get the same.
See what happens going forward because he's going like in fourth round rookie draft. Some of them like not even drafted. You
Yeah.
can pick them up off waivers depending, on the league and how deep it is and all that. But
Yeah.
yeah, and then there's Will Levis going to the Titans. Obviously, I guess Willis is done, saying that he might not even make the team. They've already got some videos of Will Levis making some throws, looking decent. But yeah, what do you think of Levis now? I mean, obviously, I know you said he didn't process well, and you hated, you liked him the least of all them. But I guess overall, now with the landing spot, does that change anything at all for you?
Not really at this point in terms of how I feel about him, but I think that overall, when you always have to understand with an evaluation of a quarterback that when they get drafted early, and we knew he was going to get drafted early ish, with this, I thought it was a good thing that he didn't get picked number one overall or even in the first round, which is a sign that they understand that he wasn't worth that yet. He needed a little bit of time.
Hmm.
And so, the physical skills are all there. He's a good play action quarterback. You're going to see some good things of him out of camp, just like we saw from Drew Lock, Mitchell Trubisky, Jordan Love. Who else can I name that hasn't been a good starting quarterback in the league, but got drafted in the first round that had
Hmm.
physical tools? So, because you're not going to see the processing part of his game yet
Yeah.
until really not even after the first 5 to 6 weeks that he plays, because NFL teams usually take about 5 to 7 weeks to scout the opposing players who are new to the league. They don't use college tape. They watch to see what they do in the pros, and they
Hmm.
start gradually putting game plans together. Each team that faces Will Levis after his first, 5 to 7 starts will be compiling a book on him, and they're not going to throw they're not going to know everything that Levis does well or doesn't do well, because the Titan scheme is only going to use certain things that he can do well or not do
That's
well.
right.
So there's only going to be hints of that. So they're going to gradually say, well, we don't think he can do this, so we'll throw a couple of things at him like this, but we're not going to like form our entire game plan around this one thing, because if he shows that he can do it, we're screwed this week. So we're going to continue to play our base defense, but we're going to throw in a few things that we think might trip him up. And then each team thereafter, those first 5 to 7 weeks, maybe by week 15, week 16, week 17, they're going to have enough of a book on him
Mhm.
that, you'll start to see at the end of the season, at the beginning of the next season, Will Levis, like if we saw Baker Mayfield or any of these other guys I mentioned, where they start strong, they look great. The media is saying, look, he's great. He's doing so well so early. And then inevitably what we see is, oh, he's been on kind of a slide lately. And, and the NFL's caught up to him. And then you start to see whether or not he can grow past that, because the first
Mhm.
5 to 7 weeks are about, can he take the speed of the game, learn the offense, and play to the level that he showed at college. Then when they throw the new stuff at him, it's like, can he identify things that he hasn't seen before? And then
Mhm.
it's, can he grow past what he was in college? And that's where you start to see the guys who either are second contract starters and franchise players and the guys who become journeyman backups who can come into a game and, at least they have the NFL arm and and they're up and down a little bit more often. So Levis, I kind of anticipate to have that pattern to his game, and he's just going to have to prove that he can really grow a great deal within his within what his game has shown at Kentucky. And if he can, and the Titans still have a strong ground game and can limit what he does to the things he does really well and not have to put it all on his shoulders, he might have a good career,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, they didn't draft really, and they didn't draft anybody at wide receiver. It's really only Burks there, right? So
Well, Burks, yeah, and the Kyle Phillips kid out of UCLA
Kyle
is
Phillips, yes,
still
that was on him.
kind
He
of,
got hurt though, right?
yeah, he got hurt, so he still might be interesting. And then I would add they I don't know if I would believe in him, but as a late round flyer in your expanded dynasty, when it's this time of year after your dynasty draft and you expand your rosters for the summer, I would keep putting Racing McMath on my roster a little bit just to kind of see what happens if he can continue to build on some things. The kid out of Reggie Roberson, the kid out of SMU, he had an ACL tear a couple years ago that was tough to get over. The Titans originally signed him. They let him go. He went to Chicago. Then they re-signed him. So he's interesting. And of course, the tight ends that they've got, Chig, Okonkwo is certainly a fascinating guy to consider. So, that and throwing the ball to a guy like Tajae Spears could be really interesting too. So it's not an exciting core for sure.
Yeah.
But Burke can make it kind of exciting, I think, and can get some decent plays. And, that's why, but like you said, as you're alluding to, it's why Will Levis didn't move much. The needle didn't move much. Then he wound up in Tennessee.
No. Speaking of Tajae Spears, he was a guy that I liked a little bit, didn't like crazy a lot. But now that the news of the one ACL and no cartilage and arthritis, I'm just staying away. Like I'm not even touching him. But what do you think about Spears?
Well, I think that's the safe play, and certainly, if you're going to play it safe, that's the way to go. On the other hand, if I'm going to make a case for him, because I liked him a lot, is that Hines Ward played his entire career without ACLs at all. John Elway didn't have an ACL when he entered the league. And Frank Gore's had multiple ACL tears. Brian Westbrook's had multiple ACL tears. Both of them had 2 ACL tears before they even entered the league. So for me, the question is, are you getting a Jay Ajayi who has one good year and then everything blows up? Or are you looking at a guy who plays really well and you look at his tape and it's like, doesn't look like a guy who's basically on a ticking time bomb of a knee. So if it's not bugging him and the stability's there for his legs, and the moves that he makes requires a lot of stability. So if he's been playing 2 years and looking good doing it, and considering that running backs basically have career, you're looking at 3. If you get 3 good years out of a running back, you've done well, So I'll take the chance if I can on a guy like that, based on the ability that I've seen, especially if the safe play is the pervasive thought that people have, and it influences ADP enough that you can get them as maybe a late second or a third round pick.
Yeah, I think just the hurt from Todd Gurley. I'm like, yeah, you know what? I'll just pass. That was a great run for him, but it's just it's sad. Just when he retired, I'm like, damn, like I had to stop playing and everything. It sucked.
It is, and that's the tough part, is that we want to learn our lessons from other players and what happened with them, but at the same time, we have to understand that every player's situation is different. So if it's the same thing though. You play it safe. It's like the check down. There's times that you do have to play it safe, but you just have to decide whether or not you're going the Alex Smith route where every answer for you is the check down. And if
Mm,
you're always playing it safe, you're
that's
never
true.
going to get the exceptional circumstance. So make sure I would always say what I recommend to people when you're drafting is take a look at how many picks that you really like or players you really like, where you're going, that's a risky pick, but I really want to make it. And
Mm,
if it seems that like out of, say it's a 5-round draft, if you have 3 picks that are that way, and your team isn't, and you're really needing this draft to build your team, maybe you
take
need to
that.
you need to be safe with 2 more of those picks than going risky with 3.
Gotcha.
That kind of thing.
Yeah, I think just some of the other guys going like in that area, right? The Chase Browns, the Zach Evans. Like, I just rather take a chance on those guys.
I feel it. I understand.
Speaking of Zach Evans, I mean, I liked him coming in, but there's something that worries me a little bit. But at the same time, now like he does have an opportunity, right? There's only Cam Akers. I mean, can he beat out Kyron Williams? I think so. But yeah, what do you think about Zach Evans?
Yeah, without a doubt. Unless there was really real fire to any smoke about him off the field, and the smoke off the field about him was he's immature. Well, that was
Mm,
from high school. And if you look at back in high school, what did he really do? Did he punch out some woman in a bar? Did he drag a pregnant woman down the stairs? Did he
mhm.
steal something? Did he do drugs? No, he didn't do any of those things. He didn't want to give up his phone during the championship game the night before, which was policy of his high school team, and they suspended him for the game. Now, if you know a little background about Zach Evans, then you know that one, he's a really good student who was academic honor roll at TCU first year as a freshman. Second, he was a good student in high school, and his grandfather was really his role model and patriarch of the family. And the grandfather passed away the year before he got recruited, before his major recruiting effort. And he took over his own recruiting because apparently the nice way to put it is his mom and dad just weren't really capable of being there for him on that kind of a level. So he had to handle it. So I don't know many 17, 18-year-olds, and I've raised a few of them who are now on the coming on the early side of 30, who who are good human beings, but may not have been able to handle the Georgias, Alabamas, Texases, and all these teams coming at them and trying to handle this, and then feel like that they have to give up their phone still during the recruiting cycle
Mhm.
the night before a game. They might have made the wrong decision too. And even the
Yeah.
coaches said, whatever. But then they think, oh, well, Kendre Miller beat him out. No, if you look at the film, you look at the data, really, it's just that Evans got turf toe, he got toe injury, he got hurt, and he was out playing Miller before that. And when he left, well, what people don't realize either is that there were Gary Patterson told alumni that if TCU didn't get their NIL deals or situation together quickly, that he expected to lose 30 players from his team around this time last year. So this time last year, nobody was expecting TCU to go to the national championship game. And if you knew Kendre Miller was going to be pretty good, and you knew you could get a better NIL deal with an SEC team, it's not like you were
Mhm.
going to Central Arkansas and transferring down. You punched up from TCU, even if the records
Yep.
didn't show that. So he just wound up with a freshman of the year candidate and Quinshon Judkins working with him. But when you watch the tape, he's a very skilled runner. And, you know, Kyron Williams is a scat back. He's a slow scat back without a lot of power, with
Mhm.
okay decision making, not really refined decision making, who might not be as good as Ronnie Rivers, the Fresno State scat back, who's quicker, a little faster, and a smarter runner, and equally good pass catcher, and maybe as good of a route runner. So I wouldn't even be surprised if the depth chart reads, Cam Akers, Zach Evans, Tyon Evans out of Louisville,
Ion, that's right.
who I think is a sneaky good player, and maybe Ronnie Rivers and Kyron Williams is looking for a job. I wouldn't be shocked if
Wow.
that
Okay.
happened.
Yeah. No, Evans was the guy. Yeah, I posted about Evans a little while back. I mean, what 6.9 a carry, 91.3 elusive rating according to PFF. And then I think the biggest thing is that Akers is gone next year, right? If they don't resign him, which
Yeah.
I don't think they will, but we'll see what happens. He's got a chance, next year to be, have even more of a role.
Without a doubt, and so this could be an Evans backfield. Both of
Yeah,
them, both
Evans,
of
Evans.
them, both of them have the opportunity to be good, just check down options in the receiving game. Zach Evans is a very good pass protector for this level of play entering the NFL. He'll only get better. Tyon Evans is promising in that regard, has a little
Mhm.
bit more of a ways to go. But, Evans is a little more powerful, or Tyon Evans is a little bit more powerful. Zach Evans is a little savvier in terms of the decision maker. They could be a dynamic 1-2 punch if they can get this offensive line together in LA.
Yeah, well, another guy actually that I liked wound up going undrafted. Sean Tucker, the heart. I guess he had a heart issue. What are your thoughts on Sean Tucker? Because I had him like as my number 4, like running back coming in, number 4, number 5 running back coming in.
Sure, and I thought that he had the best acceleration on film of any back that I saw, like the most notable acceleration. He's a good cutback runner. He really understands how to set up cutbacks. He's got that deep speed that you want to that you'd like to see. There's some decision making things that he can get a little bit cleaner at, but it's nothing that would preclude you from thinking that he's not a viable NFL prospect. So you look at Tampa, and this team's a mess, if you ask me. Like
Oh yeah,
it's Brady held this thing together uh, fairly well, and certainly what's left is basically Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, and then I would say Otten, Cade
and I like
Otten
yeah.
are like
Mhm.
3 good players, but that offensive line is weak. They've lost more guys. And Rashad White, while physically talented, is a bit of a flawed decision maker. Leonard Fournette outplayed him, if you ask me, from what I saw as a decision
Mhm.
maker.
Yeah, I
It's
didn't like
just,
White.
yeah, White's promising physically and can catch the ball, but there's a good reason to believe that if White doesn't dramatically get better, that Sean Tucker could be in a position to really thrive. And when you pay an undrafted free agent over $100,000 in a signing
Yep.
bonus instead of, I don't know, 5,000 or 8,000 or 10,000,
Mhm.
that's a signal that says we know you were worth drafting, and
Yep.
we expect you to contribute to our team.
Yeah, they gave him 155, if I'm not mistaken, which is
Yeah,
what, like a 6th-round draft pick or something like that, almost
yeah.
equivalent to. So yeah, I mean that was yeah. So Sean Tucker, I'm excited to see what happens there. Hopefully he is okay, makes the team, doesn't have any more medical conditions. Do you know exactly what it was?
I didn't,
Okay,
there's only so much access to medicals I ever get, so I don't usually lean too hard on it. But I heard the same thing was a heart condition. So
yeah. Let's see. Roshan Johnson goes to Chicago. You've got Herbert there. You've got Foreman there. Foreman is probably gone next year. Do you see Roshan Johnson as somebody who can take over that backfield?
I think it's possible. I like Herbert a little bit more
Okay.
as a player, but Johnson isn't far behind, and it's very possible that this could be a nice 1-2 punch for the Bears. Um, Rashawn Johnson has good footwork. He's a powerful guy. He really understands how to set up blocks. He's getting where he has some weaknesses there. You can get a little bit better. I don't think it'll take much for him to get better. There's a good effort there as a blocker, and he has a good enough feel for it that I think he could contribute this year if they needed him to. He can help on special teams right away and then
Mhm.
grow into a committee role in this backfield. So yeah, I think he's a legitimate guy to draft, have on your roster, and think that he could give you at worst low end running back 2 production as this Bears offense gains ground.
Can Tucker elevate his value just like Pacheco did last season? Yeah, if he gets given the opportunity, then absolutely. I mean, he's going for what, 4th round rookie pick right now. I mean, some leagues he's going undrafted. I know he's moved up lately. A lot of people have kind of caught on to him
I think it's
afterwards, but
yeah. I mean, I think ability wise, the answer is yes. But we're also looking at the difference between the Chiefs' offensive line and quarterback and the and and I know Jamie asking that question. I know what team what team um, couldn't get to the Super Bowl because, and I would say, and it's my team too because I'm a Browns fan, that I don't think Baker
he is,
Mayfield is gonna help. I mean, maybe that Rams game is to signal something more, but I really don't believe that's the case. So that offensive line is much worse than what he's dealt with in college in the NFL game thus far. So, if that happens, Tucker may show something this year, but I don't think you're going to see a Pacheco-like situation. Chase Brown, on the other hand, is that guy.
Yes, I love Chase Brown.
Yeah, Marty's on it there.
Yep.
Because go ahead.
No, I was gonna say. I mean, Mixon. I don't. You don't even know what's happening with Mixon. Right? Is he getting suspended? I mean, I don't know what's happening with that legal situation. They almost were looking at trading him or getting rid of him. So I'm excited for Chase Brown, especially with Pirine not there now, because Pirine had a nice little role for himself too. So I expect Brown to be kind of involved right away.
Yeah, Mixon's probably radioactive among other teams because the media fallout to trade for a guy who has a history of violence or threats of violence against women is not going to go over well from a PR perspective, and at a position where the market value is as such that you can probably wind up with a solid player in another capacity who is going to be there for you all season. And the youth that continues to come into the league that has good talent. So Brown really has a lot to gain because Travion Williams is a scat back who can catch the ball but doesn't have great speed, doesn't have much contact balance. Chase Brown has better contact balance. He has better speed. And while he may not be one of the top running backs in this class, it's a good class, and he's a good player who should be able to give you. There's a player who could give you that Isaiah Pacheco type of, rookie bump, and I think that's why Marty brought up Chase Brown after Jamie asked that question. That's the guy. That's the guy you should be looking at with that offensive line, the quarterback, and the passing game. This team is in a position where that running back should work.
Congratulations on being football sad the past 25 years being a Browns fan. Yep.
That's the way it goes. And it's been longer than that, buddy, because I've been a Browns fan since 73. So but yep, that's the way it goes.
Oh gosh. Jay, what up? All right, what other running backs? Okay. Achane. Everybody is huge on Achane. I cannot fathom making this guy a first round pick in rookie drafts. I don't know if I'm crazy or not, but please tell me what you think about Achane. Am I crazy, or is he worth a first round pick in a rookie draft?
I don't think you're crazy.
Okay.
I do have Achane higher than I did last, pre-draft. But to me, he's really a low-end second-round pick. That's where I'd like him to be. And I know I'm not going to get him there because speed is. I joke that speed is the most seductive thing for NFL evaluators, really not even NFL evaluators, NFL media, fantasy players, and upper management in the NFL. And it's like I call it the cleavage of the NFL, where like if you think of the most chauvinistic kind of behavior that we probably grew up seeing on TV, or you heard people saying, where someone sits down with a lot of cleavage and it doesn't matter what skills they do or don't have for the job. There's some people who are just staring at their chest and just thinking about that they're going to hire this person regardless of what the person's saying and how idiotic it is or how smart it is. And speed is that way in the league. So when people look at Achane and they think of this super fast Miami Dolphins team, they're immediately enamored with that. Now, the good side about Achane is that he is a smart runner. He does understand how to make good decisions. He catches the ball well. And if this Miami Dolphins offensive line can even get remotely close to what the 49ers offensive line has become, Achane could really have a nice career as a running back 2 in a committee. But looking at a 185-ish pound runner, working between the tackles, that's a tough one to sell for me. I mean, James Cook I liked a little more last year than most, but it was because of the idea that the Bills were going to spread the field and use him more often, maybe in the slot, where he'd be more of kind of a hybrid receiver runner who would get a lot of his touches in space, like, say, DeAndre Swift during his best season, then that's more why I would be bullish on that. But with Achane, they're not going to spread the field as much, and they're going to lean on him more as a runner. And I think he'll have some big games during the course of his career. But I look at it as if he falls to me, I'll take the chance because I like the system, I like the skills, but I'm not going to make him a priority based on that he has to prove that the team is going to look at him as more than a gadget player, more than a committee space player.
I think that's my biggest thing is what does the team think and how do they feel about, they've got Mostert, they've got Wilson. Obviously, those are older guys as well. But at the same time, like McDaniels always is running this committee backfield. Just the NFL in general now is going more towards that. And yes, Jamie, that's actually, I was going to bring that up, is Achane actually went up to 192. We said he can gain weight. Now, does that take away from speed? Does that change anything? How much more weight can he gain? I mean,
yeah, if at 192, I'll put it to you this way. When we find that it's an optimistic idea, but Ronnie Hillman was also up to 195 when he came out of the league and came out into the league with Denver. But then, Cecil Lammey, who I work with at Football Guys, who covers the Broncos every day, would tell you that by the first month and a half of the season, he couldn't hold that weight on, and he was well under 190 during the career. And then once the team saw that, they're like, we need him to hang on to that weight, or else we're going to feel like we're going to run him down. So the big question isn't whether he can gain the weight right now, but it's whether he can hold on to the weight that he gains this year. So it's a positive. That's a good start, but we got to have to see, and that's a good point by Kide, which is is he boom bust week to week? If you get big play rushes, that could be worthwhile to you. Good football player, but I guess to me is like short term, maybe Achane is going to be exciting for you, but are you going to really put him in the same tier as any of the 3 quarterbacks? 4 or 5 of the wide receivers who are going to be in really good situations, 2 really good tight ends. And maybe if you think Michael Mayer is going to be a lot more than just a reliable, steady guy, maybe 3, maybe 4 tight ends, especially if you're in a 1.5 PPR league, those guys are going to be, the tight ends become really valuable. And then maybe 3 to 4 other running backs. Is he really a top 12, top 15 pick? I think it's a stretch. Maybe he works out, but I don't see it.
Yeah, I'm if I miss, I miss. I'm fine with missing out. There's just other guys I need to take because he's going as early as like super flex. I mean, the 110, like he's going. After Kincaid and Levis, there, like people are taking Achane. I just can't get behind it. But Dalvin Cook to Miami, yeah, we'll see. I don't know. That could be.
That'd be beautiful.
I mean, the Achane lovers are going to be devastated, but
yeah, but that's a beautiful fit. That's exactly what you'd want at this point. So
so Lamey's a genius. Maybe get back on the Troutman train. Yeah. Troutman's back.
There you go.
TB Dubs, what's up, brother? Kendre Miller going to the Saints. Is Kamara going to be suspended? Is he not? We don't know how that's going to turn out. We've got Jamal Williams there as well. Is Kendre Miller a guy that you think can take over there, for New Orleans, and possibly as soon as the season if Kamara is suspended.
He can, but he's the type of guy that the short answer to the question is, if you have a loaded running back roster, but you are trying to pick the best player available in, say, the mid-second round, maybe Kendre Miller's the guy you take because it's a luxury pick. Best up doing it by best player available. But if you're trying to say, I love his talent, and the answer is yes, he could be the guy this year if they need him to be. But that means that not only is Kamara out, but Jamal Williams is banged up to some extent that he needs help as a pass protector and receiver. And Miller can become a good pass protector and a good receiver, but he's not quite there for NFL standards yet. It might take him a year, maybe two, for him to fully realize that. So he's more of a two-down back right now who can give you a little bit in the passing game. But you've got, if Kamara ends up either he gets the plea bargain and doesn't serve much suspension time, or he's found innocent for some reason, whatever the rationale is. I don't mean to say for some reason. I don't know the details of the case, but if he's found innocent, then it's just that they had video. And I think, Drew Davenport at Football Guys has talked about, when you've got video like that, probably there's something there. But I'll just put it this way: is there's a possibility with two 28-year-old backs who both play really well on passing downs, in Williams and Kamara, that it might take 3 years before Miller actually sees the field. It might be his third year before that happens. And so you got to be patient with that. At the same time, even if it doesn't, it's going to require two guys to get hurt for him to really ball out, because Jamal Williams may not be a fantasy darling most of the time, but he's just a really good football player. And, when you put it from that perspective, we're looking at probably running back 3 type of production early on, even if he's splitting time with Jamal Williams. Though you'll have some big game upside there. To me, it's kind of more like you're looking at Kendre Miller as a long-term build priority as opposed to a right now guy.
Right now. Yeah, definitely. I agree with that. Roschon or Achane? You already know who I'm taking. I know Jamie loves himself some Roschon. Roschon or Achane for you, Matt?
I've got Achane, but it's, at the same time, let's be real. Would you take Achane or Jonathan Mingo or Josh Downs or Tank Dell, or a Michael Mayer? And the answer might be, depending on your league, everybody but the running back, which means then, those guys are better propositions than, say, going with Johnson, but Johnson versus a guy like Jalen Hyatt or Tyler Scott or Eric Gray, Abinaconda, Stetson Bennett, a second string quarterback type. I would say Johnson's the better deal there.
Definitely. I agree. I'll take Johnson. I don't have any Achane shares at all. I'm okay. I'll miss out if I'm wrong.
Hey man, that's the way it goes, and
right?
that's the wonderful part about this game is, there's reasons why you might say, you know what, I'm not taking Bijan Robinson, because if I have the draft capital for my league, I might be better off in the first round getting me Anthony Richardson, and Jackson Smith and Jigba, as opposed to taking Robinson and then what's available after that.
That's right. I mean, speaking of Jackson Smith and Jigba, my favorite wide receiver of the class, way beforehand. But I mean, I love the spot that he goes to there in Seattle. I love that, obviously it sucks the first year. You've got Lockett obviously there as well. How long is he going to stay? Obviously, he's an older guy now. And just for business purposes, he might be gone next year in general. And we've seen both of those guys, Lockett and DK, both be top 15, fantasy wide receivers together. So, yeah, what are your thoughts on the landing spot for JSN?
I love it. I think he's a top 5 player for post drafts, because really Shane Waldron, he came over from LA, And LA ran 11 personnel, 3 wide receivers 90% of the time some of those seasons.
Mm-hmm.
And they didn't do that in Seattle the past couple of years. But let's remember something. Just because they didn't do it, and just because the question was posed to them this offseason about it, and Pete Carroll started talking about his tight ends, that doesn't mean that Pete Carroll's saying that they're not going to roll with that. What Pete Carroll is basically saying is what he's not saying is what you should be listening to. What he's not doing is not throwing Dwayne Eskridge under the bus for having a concussion as a rookie who was their second round pick. You don't pick a receiver in the second round if you're not planning on using the offense around him, and he was a slot receiver with big play ability. That didn't work, so they had to lean on their tight ends. What Pete Carroll also didn't say was, we don't have everybody else on our depth chart who could be that slot receiver after Dwayne Eskridge before we pick JSN. He also didn't say, we don't want to use our tight ends, because if you're Will Dissly, if you're Colby Parkinson, if you're any of the tight ends on that who are halfway decent players, and you hear from your head coach in the offseason that we don't want to go with 12 personnel or 13 personnel, but we nearly got into the playoffs or got in the playoffs because of the help that we leaned on you, you're not going to want to play for this team. And if you have a shot to say, get me out of here, maybe you can lean on your agent to do that. Instead, he's a good coach to basically say, basically what he's saying is, we may need all of these guys. JSN may get hurt, and Dwayne Eskridge may have to play like the second round guy he was. But the real answer is, when you hear all that, you put it together, you go, of course they wanted to go 11 personnel. Of course they wanted to do that more often. They just drafted Jackson Smith-Njigba in the first round, who's a terrific slot receiver who can probably give you a lot of that Cooper Kupp-esque type of matchup advantages inside, and then occasionally flip him outside as you need him to, and then you can move any of the other two, either Metcalf or Lockett inside, and Lockett's still great as an inside receiver, and you can create terrific matchups. So I anticipate that while Shane Waldron and Seattle may not have Seattle running 11 personnel 90% of the time like the Rams sometimes do, I don't think it's going to be – I think the percentage is going to be high enough that JSN will be a fantasy factor this year, if not one of the better fantasy factors among the rookie receivers.
Yeah, definitely. Now, JSN, Olave, and Garrett Wilson, which of those do you think is the best of the trio there?
I'm an Olave guy, and I've always,
okay.
To me, Olave is the best route runner. Maybe not the maybe not the most dynamic with the footwork, but in terms of understanding how to set up stems, he can do it from multiple positions. And I think he is the most consistent pass catcher, and probably just the most polished, efficient player. Wilson's the flashiest, and Njigba might be flashier than Olave. It might be flashier than Wilson in certain aspects of route running, but not as physically gifted as a runner after the catch. But I think Olave for me is probably the steadiest and the most technically sound.
All right. Rashid Rice goes to the Kansas City Chiefs. We saw Sky Moore, last year, same thing. Everybody's kind of pushing them up the boards. I particularly am not a big fan of Rashid Rice at all. I still have faith in Sky Moore. I don't know. Tell me what you think about either of those guys. But what do you think about Rashid Rice here going to Kansas City?
Yeah, it's a much ado about little, if you ask me, because I didn't like Rashid Rice as much either. I think that he has some things to work out catching the ball. His attack of the football has some work to do. And when you look at the Chiefs, it goes back to Mecole Hardman. Mecole Hardman was supposed to be a big thing. Everybody on fantasy was like, "Oh, I'm going to get a piece of that Patrick Mahomes passing game."
Right.
And how many starting seasons has he given you? How many starting seasons has Marquise Valdes-Scantling going to give you as the third option in this attack? How many what about Sammy Watkins? What about any receiver in that group? It's basically been Tyreek Hill and Kelsey, and then last year when Juju Smith-Schuster was healthy, it was Juju Smith-Schuster and Patrick Kelce. Patrick Mahomes doesn't support multiple receivers on the level that people expect, because when they think elite quarterback, they think, ooh, I might have like those years of Peyton Manning where he could give me 2 to 3 receivers and a tight end and maybe even a running back in the passing game. It's not like that. So until it shows otherwise, I would much rather go with the second-year guy and more as someone who's going to continue to grow and improve. And before even that, they added Richie James, who I've always thought was an underrated player. And I was on the Big Blue Review last year this time, and they asked me about free agents and draft picks. And I said, listen, before we even get to like receivers that you may draft, Richie James might be the biggest surprise you guys have. And to me, he's kind of like an Antonio Brown starter kit, meaning that like he's not probably ever going to get to Antonio Brown status, and there's probably a piece or two missing that you would need to have that, build that type of a model. But there's a lot to his game that's very good, and he used to work out with Patrick Mahomes before Mahomes got drafted, and work out with him during the offseason. I don't know if they consistently worked out during the offseason, but I know there was a time that they did. And Mahomes has been known to say, I worked out with Justin Watson. I like that kid. Can you guys bring him in? So I wouldn't be surprised if the same thing was asked with James. And James, if Moore's slow on the draw to figure things out, Richie James would be that guy.
Yeah, it was interesting when they signed Richie James. I didn't really know what to think, because he was good with the Giants last year, and they had they didn't have anybody. But all right, let's hit these other 3 first-round receivers real quick. Quentin Johnston, Zay Flowers, Jordan Addison. We'll hit Zay Flowers first, because most people are fading him because of the whole Baltimore situation, Lamar Jackson. I'm not. I'm actually for it. I like it. I think they will throw the ball more. But yeah, what do you think about Zay Flowers in that offense now with Lamar?
Yeah, the whole Lamar Jackson thing is that people are still stuck on the idea that he's not an actual quarterback. And some people say, no, I'm not, I'm not that kind of guy. I don't think that biased and all of that. But then when you say, well, they're going to spread the field and throw the ball more, than, well, I just don't know if, that's really much of his game. And it's like, well, you're still thinking the same way. What you don't realize is that in Bobby Petrino's offense, he managed an NFL offense at Louisville, one of the better offensive schemes in the NFL in Louisville, because Petrino was known as an offensive architect by NFL standards. The thing is that just like Deshaun Watson, just like, Drew Brees or Tom Brady, they don't put a lot of velocity on the ball on deep outs. So those low line drive throws that Josh Allen makes, you're never going to see that out of Lamar Jackson. But 50, 60, 65-yard throws in the air, leading a receiver down the field, he can do that. And they're going to spread the field and have a lot of receivers who can run after the catch. The common thing you see is with Bateman, Beckham, Duvernay, and Flowers is that they all run very well after the catch, and they're going to use them in ways to get them working across the field. And Lamar Jackson is great in the pocket. So for me, Zay Flowers is a top 10 pick. Totally love that landing spot. And Odell Beckham wasn't playing with an ACL a couple years ago, and he had one originally when he entered the league. So, it was a little bit of, and he's older, and it was a little bit of a difference for him. So, I just was doing my projections for the Ravens, and I don't know if I can project 10 games out of Odell Beckham Jr. just yet.
Yeah.
So Zay Flowers, to me, Flowers is going to be it has a good shot to be one of the top 3 options. Maybe he's not a fantasy guy this year at a high level, but he'll be at least a wide receiver 3 by early next year, at least.
Yeah, I feel pretty much the same way. I like Zay Flowers. Quentin Johnston goes to the Chargers, right, with a good QB there, and Herbert. Some guys maybe he can learn from and actually grow and progress a little bit. Quentin Johnston, because we know not great off the line of scrimmage, a lot of body catches, not catching with his hands, right? So hopefully he has a chance to kind of improve those things and grow with Herbert and not being like the number one guy right away. I feel like if he would have went to like the Texans, I wouldn't have liked that because he's like the guy and everybody's focused in on him. Where you can kind of get to learn a little bit, on the Chargers, being that you have Keenan Allen, you have Mike Williams over there as well. But yeah, what are your thoughts on Quentin Johnston there?
Yeah, it's a good point, Stevie. And it's the thing is that if you put him outside and make him win contested catches, a la Mike Williams, or or any type of primary wide receiver, that's the body catches come into play. He's much better catching the ball with his hands when it's quick hitting throws where he's breaking back to the quarterback or breaking across the field, and the ball's at the near the numbers. And he does very well there. He runs good routes in that area of the field, and in that area of the field, and those types of routes that break in that manner. And he's very good after the catch. So most likely you're going to see more often Keenan Allen used as a flanker. Mike Williams stays at split end, and you're going to see Quentin Johnston get that matchup inside in the same way that, say, a even less skilled player like Kenny Golladay had Golden Tate and Marvin Jones opposite him, and he's getting matched up against linebackers and safeties, running in straight lines and earning production that had some teams foolishly thinking maybe we should make him a number one and give him a wide receiver one money, even though they didn't think about the fact that, the guys who gave him those, who really earned that money for him, were Marvin Jones and Golden Tate, and so it's the same kind of thing with Johnston, but Johnston's a little more talented. So his value went up for me based on the landing spot.
Yeah, me as well. I felt a lot more comfortable of him going there. And then, of course, there's my guy Jordan Addison now on my Minnesota Vikings. I can't say I love the pick because our defense is so bad. I thought maybe we should have just traded back and got some extra picks.
Sure.
But we're getting rid of Thielen. We need another guy in the offense. We've been looking for a wide receiver too since last year. We wound up getting Tajae Hutchinson instead, so he's pretty much the second option there. But I always kind of felt like Addison was always like a number two guy. I didn't feel comfortable with him being like that number one guy always. And then him going to Minnesota was just like, for me, it's like, okay, perfect. I'm comfortable with that. We saw Adam Thielen produce top 15 seasons with even JJ there as well. So, yeah, I like Jordan Addison. What are your thoughts on Addison, especially now going to the Vikings across from a guy like JJ?
Yeah, I agree with you because you look at it this way. First, it's a team building philosophy thing. If your defense is awful, but you have a really strong offense and your offense can keep you in contention, and you're trying to build a football team, and you're at a point where if I try to focus on my defense too much, but I've lost a key component of my offense, and I might lose a second one in a trade that we're going to have to trade away one of those key components. Is it better for me to shore up the offense that has less road to travel to be shored up, or start focusing on the defense that has a much longer road to travel, and now our offense has taken 2 steps back? And I think that's the thing. To me, I can see the logic of saying, you know what, let's get Addison in here because the kid's a good route runner. He makes plays after the catch. And like you said, he's a number 2 receiver. To me, I call this the bully and the mouthpiece situation, where, like, you think of those movies that we all have seen. They're usually kids movies about school where there's like some little shrimp who's always running his mouth, and he's the buddy of the bully. He's like the remora eel on the shark, and he's like running his mouth and picking the fight with the of the kid that's going to be bullied, and then the bully comes in and like does his business, and the little runt who like said all this stuff is like, the one that you really would like to pop in the mouth. But anyway, Devonta Smith was that type of player. Calvin Ridley was that type of player. People mistook them as wide receiver ones, but when they had to match up against a physical cornerback who wouldn't be bullied and bullied them back, they get pinned to the sideline, and they're basically, they're rendered inadequate, basically for being a number one. They may win some occasionally, but not as often. And so what teams realize is like, well, Calvin Ridley with Julio Jones could give you borderline wide receiver one numbers. Sure, of course they could. Same with A.J. Brown, because A.J. Brown might be the biggest bully wide receiver in the league at this stage, opposite Devonta Smith. Now he doesn't have to face that number one corner, in those
pivotal situations. And the same thing with Justin Jefferson. Justin Jefferson might be the best wide receiver in the league. And now you put a guy there certainly the kid out of Miami, I can't remember his name for some reason that you guys have, who had a nice slot year 2 years ago.
On the Vikings?
Yeah. What's his name? The slot receiver who returned punts, University of Miami. I don't remember his name.
You talk about not Percy Harvin years ago, right?
No, like the past couple of years.
Why can
I know everybody's probably
the return punts. I know who you talk about. I can't get the name.
That's all right. I got it right
Cheryl,
here.
or it's not Cheryl's.
Yeah, it's actually KJ Osborne.
Oh, it is KJ Osborne. Okay,
yeah.
okay. Yeah, he's there now. Yeah.
So Osborne, certainly Osborne is competent as a contributor, but he's not really a high-end starter, I think. So, Addison really ups the game there, and that really just creates, with Addison, Hutchinson, and Jefferson, Kirk Cousins has so many weapons there that defenses cannot really focus on one guy without somebody going to town, on a regular basis, because if you double or bracket Jefferson on some level, Hawkinson's going to go huge. Addison has a chance to go huge. The run game benefits. And so now you continue to keep that there, and they're just going to hope that with a veteran quarterback that they can outscore you every week. That's the plan. And so I love Addison, and I think he's a top 10 pick as a result of the dynamic that he lands in.
Oh, yeah, without a doubt. Boutte criminally overrated pre-NFL draft. Yeah, what are your thoughts on Kayshon? I don't know if it's Boutte or Boutte, whatever it is.
Boutte, I think what they call him is, I liked Boutte, and I know that there are a lot of people who just felt like he was overrated because they looked at the production early on in his career and then it dropped off. Then they look at the metrics of the combine and they hated the metrics and were like, see, he's not that athletic. But I think people were expecting him to be Jamar Chase part 2, Justin Jefferson part 2 or part 3, kind of thing. And he's not. He's a Jarvis Landry, Robert Woods type of player. And so when, even now, we can say Robert Woods and Jarvis Landry are a good player, but when, if we put little heat maps on people's brains, and said Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, AJ Brown, it's going to light up like a Christmas tree. When I say, Jarvis Landry, Robert Woods, it's kind of more going to light up like a soft, fireplace glow, more than anything. But the thing is that those guys are capable of giving you 70, 80, 90 receptions and 800 to 1,100 yards receiving. And Boutte is that type of player. Metrically, he's fast. He's a more explosive version of both players. And so, and he's very, and those guys didn't have vertical leaps either that were good.
Yeah.
So put him in the slot. Yeah. Put him in the slot. He's going to probably be the replacement to Jacoby Myers. They're going to have a real offensive coordinator in Bill O'Brien this year. And that means that you're probably going to see more improvement from Mac Jones and see a little bit better play. And Boutte is probably going to be a guy that can be a driver of this offense. Maybe never anything more than a wide receiver 2, but considering that you can probably get him in the 3rd round, that's not bad.
Yeah, I like Boutte coming out originally. Then he had the horrible combine, and I'm like, oh man, what? And he, some off the field issues as well. Then when he got drafted to New England, I was like, if there's one spot that could straighten him out and and give him a chance, it's going to be New England.
I've hated every New England receiver pick since probably 2000. Okay, but the only one that I've liked, literally since then, is this pick. I've been saying for years, and the Patriots have been said it recently in the past 5 years. Bill Belichick said, "Listen, we've had trouble drafting receivers. We don't know. We have not been very good at evaluating that position." and that's been something that, it just seems to have been the case. And I think Boutte is a guy that it's more about maturity. And they did say, the coaching staff said the light seemed to come on a little bit later in his career.
Yeah.
But when you look at the combine and you look at his production, again, if you look at his 40, you look at his short area speed and all of that. My wife's faster than him. My wife's probably faster than you, and she's got a torn. But my wife ran a 10.78 40 back in 1987. So that's a little bit of a different story, and consistently ran 11 too. But that said, seriously, the short area quickness, it's on par with Robert Edwards. The vertical is on par with Robert Edwards. The 3-cone time, all are competent. And people often, again, they think the faster, the better. The faster, the better. Well, oftentimes those guys end up not knowing how to run routes worth a darn.
Yeah.
And what you really need is guys who are at the threshold of what's acceptable for the NFL. His times are at the threshold of what's acceptable. It's a matter of, is he going to practice? Is he going to work at the craft? If he does, he's got more than enough skill.
Yeah,
yes,
I
they do, Jamie.
About that. Yeah. Yeah, Steelers always got some good scouts in there. If you had to pick one guy that you feel that you like, I don't want to say undrafted, but a sleeper guy, I guess not, early on that I guess we've talked about yet. Is there anybody that you particularly really like?
Yeah, I mean, I'll give you a few. Marvin Mims and Jayden Reed, I really like. I would
like
say,
Jayden Reed too.
Yeah, if we're going to go deeper than that, I would say, a guy that fits the bill. Another guy that I would say, Luke Schoonmaker with Dallas is going to be very interesting. Elijah Higgins is basically free money right now.
Yeah.
I mean, he's gonna get a chance to grow into being a Darren Waller-esque type of player. He's not getting drafted in most leagues, so why wouldn't you take that in Miami, where he might really earn some great matchups? And then a late round guy, 2 late round guys that probably won't get a chance, but you won't even have to pick them. You can just monitor them in the offseason. And then if they start to pop a little bit in training camp, maybe you add them while you have an expanded roster. And if injuries occur and they get a chance to play, they can play. Christopher Brooks with Miami, the running back out of BYU, is a bowling ball of a back, 6'1", 235, who can catch the football, and he's a smart runner. Jaleel McLaughlin, who is really, I said he's a Philip Lindsay type of running back in terms of size, skill, in terms of decision making, which Philip Lindsay was great as a decision maker. He just couldn't catch the ball. McLaughlin can catch the ball, and he's fast, and he's a good decision maker, and he wound up in Denver. And with Javonte Williams not quite ready, Samaje Perine, basically, as I've said long ago, being a cast iron skillet, which you can't swing one of those things really that fast. But you can hit, as I saw on TikTok the other day, you can hit an alligator with it and make it move back if you're a Florida man, which is what I saw on TikTok. They do need a speed element, and McLaughlin could be that guy.
Jayden Reed, you briefly had mentioned, a guy that I really liked, and hot take that I keep saying is, that what if he turns out to be the wide receiver 1 in Green Bay? Is that a possibility for him to out target Christian Watson? A guy like Jayden Reed, who skilled route runner, probably lines up in the slot from day one there, and has an opportunity. What do you think about that?
I think it could be really good. And if Aaron Rodgers were still there, I'd be super excited about Jayden Reed. But with Jordan Love, we just don't know what we're going to get. And is Jordan Love going to be that guy that forces this regime to have so much turnover that a new coach comes in and says, none of these are my guys, so I'm going to draft my guys, and Jayden Reed can go out with the bathwater here. So I'm worried about that type of thing. But I think Reed certainly can be one of the top 2 receivers on this depth chart, and he's a good one. Puka Nacua is a good late round guy too with the Rams, because who else do they have other than Cooper Kupp?
I don't know. I can't even name is Van Jefferson still even there? I mean, Tutu Atwell.
Tutu Atwell. If you put if you put a blanket on him and a stiff breeze came by, he could fly out of the stadium with the speed and that lightness that he's got going on. Puka Nacua is a Golden Tate type of player in terms of style. Lou Nichols, I'll ask that. Yep. Lou is rugged. He's kind of a Marion Barber type of player in terms of style of play. He needs to become a little more skillful as a decision maker. I think he has a chance to make this roster. And maybe in a year or two, we could be looking at a more refined player. So, he's a worthwhile guy that you can, again, late, you don't even have to draft. You can add in on your waiver wire and just have him sitting on an expanded roster, especially if you have a practice squad.
Marion Barber. Is there a guy that you particularly do not like that I guess the consensus or the people out there in the community do like? Is there a player that you're off on that other people really do like?
Yeah, probably. Let me think of a few that probably. I mean, other than in addition to Will Levis.
Yeah, in addition to Will.
In addition to Herndon Hooker, which I don't quite get.
Yeah, Herndon
either.
Hooker. Yeah.
Not totally feeling that. Rashee Rice is certainly on that list for me. We talked about why with him.
Yeah.
Tank Bigsby. I'm not feeling Tank, and I know that he had a nice mini camp, but again, when call me back when he's actually facing real fronts in pads in games where he's going to be disciplined with the run scheme. Because what he did in minicamp, pretty much you would expect any back to do in minicamp. And I think he has a chance to become a solid committee back for a team and maybe a low-end starter in a couple years. But I don't think he's going to be anything more than a low-end top 24 back, like a low-end RB2 for more than a couple of years and before he's looking over his shoulder. So I'm probably not as high on him. And if I can see, I would have told you before the draft that a guy like, Tyler Scott would have been on my list because there was so much love for him, it seemed like, that I saw after I had written on my scouting report. But where they drafted him, I thought it was commensurate with where he should go. And so if you get him as a 4th round pick, I think that's decent value. But there were people I thought that were looking at him as like a late 1st round type of guy. And I think that's, I can't think anybody that really jumps off the page beyond those guys.
All right. Well, I think we're about to wrap it up here. Appreciate everybody out there for tuning in and commenting. Appreciate all you guys, of course, as always. Smash that like, smash that subscribe if you're not already. Appreciate you guys. But Matt, let them know, where to find you and how to get that rookie scouting profile.
Sure. You can get the rookie scouting portfolio, the RSP, at mattwaldman.com. It's available via PayPal. And you can find my YouTube channel, Matt Waldman's RSP Film Room, that has well over 600 videos on it at, Matt Waldman's RSP Film Room. And of course, my podcast that I do weekly with several different folks, ranging from fantasy discussion to scouting conversations at Matt Waldman's RSP Cast, which is available in pretty much any format that you get podcasts with.
All righty. Guys, make sure you go check him out. I got one last question here. Can Kraft be like an Andrews to Musgrave like Hurst, meaning later round pick outproducing the earlier pick for fantasy purposes?
Absolutely, and that's why it's kind of a clusterfuck when you look at the Packers drafting these guys, and it kind of ruined both their value a little bit short term. But long term, why not take a bet on the lower end option in Kraft, who may not be as athletic as Musgrave, but may wind up being a little bit more rugged, a little bit more skilled, or doesn't have as much road to travel to really compete. So yeah, I like that idea.
All right, perfect. All right, we're getting out of here, guys. I'll be hopping over to the other channel, 420 Fantasy Hustle Network. We got a show going on there, some buys and sells going on. So you guys can follow me over there. But again, Matt, thank you for coming on. I really appreciate you and love the work that you're doing over there.
Well, I appreciate it. Thank you so much for having me. It was fun, and And it was nice to see an active audience that was really engaging, and it's always cool to be able to be on a show like this.
Absolutely. All right, guys, we are out of here. Thanks again, Matt.